Hello everyone, I am Sankalp and welcome again to Understanding Emotions. How is everyone holding up given the current situation? Today I'm going to talk about a mistake that we all make in our emotional lives, the consequences of which will likely be amplified as we practice social distancing. This mistake is so fundamental, so critical, that I claim it prevents us solve most, if not all, of our emotional problems. It is the ultimate bottleneck on our roads to emotional fitness. This mistake is the habit of seeking distraction, and it is a habit. Recall what you were doing all day today. If you are listening to this episode close to its release, which is amidst all the social distancing forced by the spread of the coronavirus, then my guess is you've spent a significant time on YouTube or Netflix or Spotify or on some good old-fashioned television. These are some activities that we classically identify as distractions. But even if you have spent time being so-called productive, for instance, if you wrote an article or some code or you practiced your instrument, chances are that you did even that to distract yourself. So really the question is, distraction from what? Typically when people talk about distraction, more often than not they are talking about it with respect to the work you do for a living. The main concern is profit and the loss of money owing to your distraction. Sometimes we talk about distraction in the context of our personal lives, as in our inability to be attentive and present to our loved ones. But these are not the ways in which I am saying distraction is a mistake in our emotional lives. I think distraction ruins our emotional lives when we actively ignore what our emotions are telling us in any given moment. Let me elaborate. Our emotions give us crucial signals about what brings us well-being. They are trying to help us in some way. A failure to pay attention to them can leave them unresolved, a nagging feeling of which carries along as we move on. If life is going great externally, you may not notice these mental knots. But when things start to go downhill, these unresolved emotions are triggered and show right at the surface. If you're experiencing plenty of discomfort as you isolate yourself socially, then chances are that your mental knots are showing up. And just to be clear, most of us have these knots in measures large or small. Okay, enough of abstractions. Let's illustrate this process with an example. Let's take a fictional person, call her Jane. Jane has had a tough day at work, where she works as a content writer in an advertising agency. Her team is planning an ad campaign for a beauty cream of a kind that promises its users fair and bright skin. In her heart, Jane knows that this cream does not really make anyone fair. Even if it does, she thinks it is inappropriate to propagate fairness as a beauty standard. Her ethical self revolts, and as a result, she experiences emotions ranging from anger to despair. But Jane has never been the one to speak up, and she does not in this meeting either. She's a nice person after all, and never hurts feelings of others. She feels upset because ethics matter to her, but at the same time, she does not want to rock the boat with her colleagues. Moreover, she sees that no one else seems to be bothered by this ad campaign, which makes her feel that she herself is being too picky. All of these emotions lead to what I've been calling a knot in her mind. By the time she goes home that evening, an unpleasant feeling lingers. She knows it's about what happened at work, but she has no idea how to navigate around that discomfort. And now she does something truly miraculous something that takes away all her pain. She watches Netflix. Boom, problem solved. Next day she goes to work and everything seems back to normal. Well, until the team meets again to discuss the campaign, in which she feels the same emotions and she deals with it all over again in the same way. This time, she also vents to a friend before watching Netflix, and it all works wonderfully well to soothe her discomfort. What's wrong with this is not that Jane sought company of her friends, or even that she watched Netflix. Those are fine things to do to soothe yourself. But what is missing is that Jane has not considered what the unpleasant emotions were telling her. She never unties her knot, but simply ignores it. If she were to meet her emotions head on, she could discover shortcomings within herself, like an inability to speak up in meetings and an inability to be assertive. That could further lead her to understand that her lack of assertiveness is a result of some childhood patterns in which she was penalized for expressing herself, perhaps made to be felt guilty about it. All of this wealth of insight lay in opening up to the emotions. But she was never taught how to access this wealth and consequently uplift her emotional life. My heart truly breaks when I see how we deal with emotions of children in particular. When I think back to my own schooling, a teacher hitting a child, aka corporal punishment, was completely legal and normal. While I was the smart child and spared a lot of the torture, and I don't use that word lightly, I am deeply saddened when I think of the unfortunate children, my friends, who were slapped and shamed for chronically not paying attention in class and for not performing well in tests. Why were they not paying attention? Did they have an alcoholic father who made their lives miserable at home? True thing, by the way. Was their family facing financial problems? Did they not receive love and care from their parents, which are essential for any child? Who cares? They are not paying attention in class and they deserve some good old beating. Now that I think back to these incidents, I am dead sure that not only was the child having problems, but the teacher was equally ill-equipped to handle their own emotions. The sad part is that all of this is done under the pretext of having good intentions. I think corporal punishment is no longer legal in my home city of Mumbai anymore. But my sense is that the shaming and scolding and everything still continues in large measure. Even for me, who was considered a quote-unquote smart child, who always paid good attention in class and scored good grades, I realized today that a lot of my excellence was driven by seeking approval of parents and teachers more than my curiosity for any subject. It was dirty fuel to be running on. Surely I got good grades, but without doubt, I lost the experience of having inspired moments which are parts of any learning and creativity process. I think all of the mainstream narrative about dealing with our emotions can be summed up with this phrase: just move on. Sad after a breakup? Just move on. Feeling angry with your friend? Just move on. Don't like how your boss treats you? Just move on. Sexually harassed? Just move on. Clinically depressed? Just move on. What's underneath this message is a dangerous lack of knowledge about how to navigate our emotional lives. And what's worse is that most of us are oblivious to this shortcoming. Alright, thank you for listening to this episode. If you're new to this show, at this point I talk about some practical tips to improve your emotional intelligence. Pertaining to today's topic, I'd like you to take note of when you're using distraction to avoid your emotions. There are two problems that you can face while doing this. One, you might not be able to notice when you're distracting yourself from something. This habit is so ingrained and so much a part of our day-to-day life that it is difficult to bring awareness to this when it's happening. As I said earlier, just catching yourself watching Netflix or the news in itself is not an indicator that you're running away from your emotions. To solve this problem, I recommend you increase your ability to be mindful. I have recorded an episode on meditation, which includes a guided meditation. I have put the link in the show notes. Second problem is, what do you do when you have noticed you're running away from some emotions? Now, in a sense, the whole podcast is about that, and there's no one single thing to do. I think the first step, in all situations without exception, would be to accept the emotion fully and with tenderness. Sometimes that itself will be enough to give you clarity. Sometimes it might not be. And as you hear more and more of this show, hopefully you'll have more and more tools and leads about what to do with your emotions. You'll build a repertoire of sorts. But the beginning of all emotional intelligence, the foundation, is acceptance. And on that, I have recorded a whole episode. It's episode 3 and it's by far the most popular episode of this show. Again, all links are in the show notes. Of course, with anything overwhelming and or clinical in nature, I recommend seeking professional help. Alright, thank you very much for listening to this episode. I hope you found it valuable. Again, if you're listening to this amidst the coronavirus situation, you are likely to experience a turmoil of emotions. Isolation and confinement by definition will mean less stimulus to distract with. So hopefully this podcast gives some direction on navigating this emotional space. My sincere hope is that this content is helpful to you. And if it is, please consider sharing this. The show is also now available on Spotify. It means a lot to me when you share this. It also means a lot when you engage back with me. So please do reach out to me using the contact form, or if you're friends with me in any of the social media, feel free to text me and engage with this material. Thank you very much once again, and see you next time.